Welcome to Longview's Professional Purchasing Series. My name's Mark Brilliant. This week we're talking about apartment buying and how to find an apartment with capital growth. There's new apartments springing up right around Melbourne, almost in every suburb. How do you find an apartment that is going to serve you well as an investment or a home and get you capital growth? Apartment living is becoming more and more popular in Melbourne. Singles, young couples, retirees, even small families are moving into apartments and enjoying what apartments have to offer. They're often in great locations within the suburb with easy access to public transport, schools, shops and parks. They can be really wonderful lifestyle opportunities. However, trends are emerging that newer apartments and apartments built over perhaps say the last 10 or 15 years haven't been getting capital growth that many of older apartments or perhaps houses have been getting. So how do you know what to look for in an apartment and how to ensure you're going to get capital growth? There's several factors that seem to be holding back newer apartments from achieving capital growth. One of those is there's too many apartments in a lot of these complexes. When you've got 50, 80 or even over 100 apartments in the same complex, often there's 2, 3, 4, 5 apartments for sale in the same building at the same time. And it becomes a real competition to see which vendor is going to have the lowest price to try and get buyers interested. It can also be really challenging when some of those apartments maybe don't have a car park or have very restricted views or restricted parking that make them somewhat compromised. And then when you've got compromised apartments competing against other compromised apartments, it becomes a real race to the bottom on price. Views, your privacy and getting natural light into the apartment are all critical when selecting apartments. And again, some of these newer buildings, especially if they've got other buildings right side by side or perhaps an apartment on the south side where it can be quite dark, can really affect the capital growth and the desirability of those apartments for tenants to want to live there and for people to want to buy them. Now, many of these apartments, these newer, bigger buildings have been sold off the plan with a high percentage of investors. Sometimes up to 80% of the building is actually owned by investors, meaning that you've got 80% tenants living in the building. It becomes somewhat of a transient population where people come and go, no one really cares or loves the building, and it's not necessarily a desirable place where you want to live. You can generally tell the difference between a building that's got a high percentage of tenants and a high percentage of owner-occupiers. Also, ones that have higher percentage of tenants can be prone to having a lot of Airbnb or short-term rentals, which can bring their own set of problems as well. High owners' corporation fees can also be a deterrent for buyers looking at these newer buildings. Sometimes $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, even higher, just for the privilege of living there. And the fees are going towards maintenance on lifts, pools and gyms. And don't get me wrong, if you're an owner-occupier and you really love the pool and the gym and you're going to use it every day, that's wonderful and you're going to get your value there. But certainly as an investor, to be paying those kind of fees so that your tenant can enjoy those facilities, it really doesn't make sense. And to have those high fees, it really is a restriction for people buying into the building, and they factor that into their purchase price. So it's again holding back capital growth on these buildings. Now in general, capital growth comes from a property having some level of scarcity, some desirability, and often a little bit of an X factor. It's these features that come together and will appeal to multiple buyers. So the best capital growth results you see are at auction, where 3, 4, 5 groups of people are going absolutely hammer and tong at the auction and they're driving the price up. And every time the property sells, every 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it may be, another group of 5 people come along and compete for it and they push the price up. And they push the price up of neighbouring homes, or if you're an apartment building, they push the price up of neighbouring apartments. That just doesn't seem to happen with these newer apartments. There's too much choice, a lot of them are compromised, and there's simply not enough competition to drive any price up. Here's some tips when looking for capital growth apartments. First of all, start with smaller complexes, ideally less than 20. You're generally going to get a higher percentage of owner-occupiers living in those complexes, and they'll typically be a nicer complex and place to live. Older style apartments tend to have less compromises with them. So they often can be located in really nice, quiet locations within a suburb. Generally, they can have better or larger floor plans, and they often or generally will have lower owners corporation fees as they don't have lifts, pools and gyms to be worrying about. Now, research the individual apartments, and we've got a couple of examples on the page here that we'll discuss in a moment. But with older apartments, they might have been sold once, twice, 3 or 4 times over the last 20 or 30 years. And you can actually go back and look at how the property has performed over a period of time. Newer apartments, you can see that too. If it's a 5 or 10-year-old apartment, what did the owner pay for it 5 or 10 years ago? What are they selling it for today? Has it had any capital growth? If it has, great. If it hasn't, is it going to get any in the next 5 or 10 years? Maybe not. So do your research on the history of the individual property that you're considering. Avoid apartments that are facing main roads. The reality is a lot of apartments, either new and old, are on busier roads. That's okay. Get an apartment that doesn't face the main road. The reality is noisy apartments are hard to rent and people don't want to live there. So don't buy an apartment if you can avoid it that fronts onto a main or a busy road. Does the apartment have some special X factor about it? Is there something that makes it unique, that makes it stand out from all the other apartments in the area or in the building and makes it more desirable? That's what you want. When you're buying an apartment, you may have to pay a bit more for that X factor, but you will get more for it in the future when you go to sell the property. It's got to be desirable to have people compete for it. You don't want to have just another run-of-the-mill little shoebox where there's 10 or 20 others available in the same suburb at the same time. We've got a couple of examples here today of properties that are currently on the market at the moment that you could purchase that have had great capital growth, and we anticipate will continue to get great capital growth, and these are the reasons why. So starting with 16 at 32 The Avenue in Windsor, it's a really nice boutique little block, only 18 in the complex. It's got north-facing living and north-facing balcony, which is fantastic. It's a very desirable and popular location with both tenants and with owner-occupiers. Now, it is a little bit of a cut-through busier street. However, this apartment is located on the side of the building and isn't really affected by the noise at all. Now, it has been updated internally, which is a bonus, but we'd still be interested and keen on this property if it hadn't, because it's got the fundamentals that make for good capital growth. Now, this one's been quoted by McGrath, the selling agent, 6 to 640. If it sells in the middle of the range at 620,000, it will have been achieving 7.7% capital growth year on year since it was sold originally in 1980. Now, that's every year. Now, 7.7% capitalised annual growth year on year is really strong performance in Melbourne and is on par with many actual houses around Melbourne in really good suburbs around Melbourne. Newer apartments, it's very, very common to see zero capital growth or 1 or 2 or 3% capital growth, and unfortunately in certain cases negative capital growth, certainly in the first 5 years. So to be performing at 7.7% year on year since 1980, this property is A grade and it's going to continue to perform. Another great example is apartment 11 at 2 Armidale Street, Armidale, a very, very popular street in Armidale, close to Malvern Shopping and Train, trams around the corner. It's very, very desirable with tenants and owner-occupiers alike. Now, this apartment we really like. It's got some X factor. It's ground floor with quite a large courtyard where you can actually also park your car. It's almost unheard of as far as being able to park your car in your courtyard for an apartment. So it brings that X factor desirability where we would anticipate multiple groups competing for this property, and you're never going to lose your courtyard. So when you go to sell this property in 10 years, you'll have people compete for it too. It's again another boutique block, only 18 in the complex, and it's also been updated internally, so it's ready to move straight in. Now, this property's been quoted 5 to 550, and again, if it sells in the middle of the range, only the middle, not even at the top, if it sells for 525, since 1996, this property will have been performing at 8.6% capital annualised growth since 1996. That's an amazing outcome for an apartment that you can buy today, for really entry-level prices in the mid, 5 to sort of 550 price bracket. So it's a fantastic capital growth investment. It's a great apartment if you're looking for somewhere to live in that area, or it'll be a terrific rentable property and desirable by tenants as well. So there are great examples of apartments for similar prices that you can get that will effectively ensure you capital growth for your portfolio over the years. At Longview, we're here to help our landlords and investors in any way we can. We offer property assessment and selection. We do off-market purchases if you're looking to add to your portfolio. We can offer with property performance and reviews and assessing your capital growth of your property, as we've done with these 2 properties today. We offer renovation and development advice, and we also assist our clients to sell, whether it's we sell it ourselves or we use our service to select the best agents for you to sell your investment properties as well. Thanks for watching today. If you've got any questions, please feel free to get in touch.